Well, hello everybody and welcome to another episode, and today we're going to take a look at this lens. This is the f0.95 50mm from 7 Artisans for APS-C cameras. This one's a Fuji version. It's here on my Fuji X-T2, but it's also available in all the other APS-C mounts, Sony, Canon, etc. This lens is an absolute blur monster. If you like blur, this is the lens for you. It will give you blur when you're near your subject. It will give you blur at longer distances. It will give you blur at even longer distances still. Pretty much no matter what the distance between your subject and your background, this lens will give you some blur. This lens is genuinely worthy of the title Blur Monster. So there's our f0.95 lens, and look at that beautiful big front element there glinting in the light. You can see the coating colours on there. I think we've got some purple and some green on there. It's a beautiful lens. It's very, very nicely made. Everything rotates so very, very smoothly. I'm turning the focus ring now. It's got a range of movement of around about 45 degrees, which is fairly short actually. But it's beautifully made. It turns with such a beautiful fluid motion. The whole lens looks and feels like a serious piece of kit. We've got the aperture ring at the front here from f0.95 there to f16. There are no click stops on this aperture, so it's good for videographers or filmmakers who want to change aperture during a shot. And it's just got that same beautiful fluid motion that the focus ring has. All very nice and very, very well engineered. It feels nice. It's got a nice tactile quality. It's made of anodized aluminium, I think, and all in all, the general feeling of quality is very good indeed. So the lens cap is a very simple metal push-on affair. It's got some felt lining around the inside to make it grip on. And that's actually my favourite kind of lens cap. They're easy on and easy off, and Bob's your uncle. So that's a nice feature. It's a nicely proportioned lens as well, and being made for APS-C mounts, it doesn't need an adapter as vintage lenses would do, which add about an extra inch or so to the length. And I think that's very nicely proportioned lens, and it sits very nicely on the X-T2 there. I have talked about these painted markings before. I think I can feel some depth on there, but they're not engraved. I think that's just the paint I can feel. I'm not going to say too much more about that because I have said plenty on engravings on these Chinese lenses in the past. I think they should be engraved. The feeling of quality on this lens is nice, and I think that would make the feeling of quality higher and make a nice lens even nicer. And one other suggestion I'll make is the focus ring here. Now, on a lot of the classic vintage lenses, there's a very nice rubber strip around the focus ring here. The Olympus Suico lenses in particular have a beautiful rubber tactile strip for the focus ring with a sort of a raised diamond stud pattern. And I do think if we could find something like that, if we could fit something like that on these Chinese lenses, then again that would make a very nice lens even nicer. As far as sharpness goes, well, this lens is quite surprising because wide open it is actually pretty sharp, at least in the center where it matters. The corners are a little bit soft, but in the center where it matters, sharpness is really good, wide open, and that's quite surprising at f0.95. It does get sharper when you stop it down, of course, as all lenses do, but why would you buy a 0.95 lens in order to stop it down? I'm really not sure, but wide open, it is sharp in the center. That makes it great for everyday photography, and it also makes it very useful for portraits as well, because it's often nice to have a sharp center and a nice soft background, and anything that can soften that background up is a good thing. So let's talk about blur. Well, as you might expect, there's loads of it, wide open, and it has character as well. Doesn't have so much character as the wildest of the vintage lenses that I've used. For example, the Helios 40-85mm f1.5 or the Zuiko 55mm f1.2, but it does have a character. Much of the time it's pretty soft and pretty well behaved, but there are certain conditions where it starts to get a bit wild, and that was actually pleasing to see. I'm glad it's got a cheeky side. I'm glad it's got a little bit of naughtiness hidden within that smoothness. After all, one of the great advantages of vintage lenses is that they do have this character, and that's why they're valued, and I think this lens has it too. Colour, well, this is a wonderful lens for colour. I'm glad to say that it's got lots of saturation. I shot most of my shots in Velvia, which is sort of the Fuji version of Vivid, but it does give very strong, very bold and resonant colours in other modes as well. And generally this lens has got a very light and a bright quality that I really like as well. Some lenses you shoot can be a little dull for some reason, but this one never. It's big, bright and bold images all the way. Contrast is really good on this lens, and it helps to make images with a big, bold and bright character. They end up looking quite intense and full of energy and full of depth and resonance. I think actually contrast is a little different on this lens to most of the other Chinese lenses that I've looked at. They all tend to be a little lower in contrast than this one, and this one is the highest contrast Chinese lens I've found so far, and I think it's all the better for that. These images are definitely rather more resonant, rather more striking than images from some of the other lenses that I've looked at. So what's this lens actually like to use? Well, lots of fun actually. I've had loads of fun with this lens. It's a very nice, very usable, rather special 50mm that opens up really, really wide for maximum blur. Its 50mm focal length behaves as a 75mm on an APS-C sensor. I find that effective 75mm focal length to be really useful on the street actually, which is mostly where I use this lens. Now, I was a little concerned because depth of field at f0.95 is really, really thin, and I was a little worried at first that it was going to be difficult to focus on the street, especially on fast moving things or relatively fast moving things like people, and I do like street portraits, you see, so I was a little concerned that it would be rather difficult to focus quickly enough, but in the event I was surprised. It's actually proved really easy to focus on the street, and I was able to make some really nice portraits with this lens. All the nicer because it has so much separation. You're pretty much guaranteed to get some separation, however long your shot, however distant your subject is. So it did work particularly well for that. I didn't find it any more difficult than any other lens to focus, which surprised me, and it's even more surprising given its short focusing throw of about 45 degrees. Despite that, I was able to focus very effectively on the street and in any other condition. Also, it'll give you plenty of blur, it'll give you plenty of separation, it'll give you some very strong colour and contrast, and some really nice sharp images too. A very nice lens indeed, and it's been a lot of fun to use. So to sum up then, I really wasn't sure what to expect when I began to use this lens. After all, there must be a lot of compromises, a lot of optical and engineering compromises necessary to get to that very wide aperture. Certainly there are in vintage lenses anyway, when you use the widest aperture ones of those. I was, however, very pleasantly surprised, and it doesn't really seem to have any of those compromises, and certainly if it does, they don't make themselves visible. What this lens is a very usable 50mm and a real blur monster too. It's a great general photography lens, and it will give you more separation than any other lens I've used, or indeed any other lens that I know of. If you're looking for a lens that will make maximum blur for your APS-C camera, then this one is most definitely worth a look. So that's it from me for now. Please don't forget to like, subscribe and ring the jolly old bell thing before you go. And if you like the content on this channel and you'd like to help it to grow and to develop, you can do that at patreon.com/Zenography, and you can do it for as little as $1 per month. As ever, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time for some more Zenography.